Welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Pia and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. As Britain confronts turmoil on multiple fronts, the monarchy faces renewed scrutiny amid Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's involvement with the Epstein scandal, challenging its moral authority and public trust as well. At the same time, a sharp rise in violent knife attacks is testing the UK's internal security and the effectiveness of its current legal framework. Across Europe, debates over Ukraine's defense continue as the EU seeks to use frozen Russian assets, while the United States, under President Trump, is adopting a more restrained stance. Amid all of this, NATO's cautious posture under Operation Eastern Sentry is also reflecting a continent striving to balance deterrence, diplomacy, and the risks of escalation with Moscow. To talk about all of this, joining us now is a very special guest, Mr. Andrew Eborn, who is a barrister, broadcaster, the president of Octopus TV Limited, and the host of The Andrew Eborn Show. Based in London, Andrew is a leading international lawyer and futurist who's been at the forefront of media and intellectual property for decades. He's also a respected commentator and speaker on international affairs, law, and technology. Thank you so much for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. My very first question...
It's a pleasure to join you.
Absolutely. My very first question is pertaining the Epstein scandal that has not just rocked the United States but the UK as well. We've recently seen King Charles III initiating a formal process to strip Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor of his royal titles and evict him from the royal residence as well. At the outset, I hope to understand how significant is this move?
Well, it is absolutely incredibly significant. It's a seismic shift for the monarchy, with King Charles stripping his brother, his younger brother, of the prince title and evicting him from the Royal Lodge, the 30-bedroom mansion. He's going to be going off to Sandringham. I predict it's probably going to be sometime after Christmas, because the royal family normally spend Christmas at Sandringham, and they're desperate to distance themselves from all the scandal, the seismic scandal, the tsunami, if you like. Every single day there's more and more revelations about the former prince. So he is going to be evicted from the Royal Lodge. He is going to be stripped of his title. And it's a clear signal, if you like, that no one is above accountability, even the royal family. And it's actually unprecedented, I would say, since the abdication crisis of 1936. And it underscores the institution's desperate need to modernize and distance itself from scandal in order to survive. That's what it needs to do. And as I've said beforehand on your brilliant station, is a lot of this is driven by Prince William, who's looking at the future of the monarchy and how that's going to survive in the modern age. He wants to modernize it. He wants to distance himself from these scandals, and certainly forcing Andrew out in this way is a step in that direction.
Absolutely. This move is also coming in the aftermath of the release of Virginia Giuffer's posthumous memoir. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor did settle his civil case with Miss Giuffer out of court in 2022 without any admission of liability, but she has repeated her allegations. Now, in your assessment, what sort of message is the royal family trying to send to the British public at large by distancing themselves from Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor now?
Well, it's very clear. It's a zero-tolerance policy on these abuse allegations. The Nobody's Girl publication, Virginia Giuffre's book, posthumously published very, very recently, has more and more scandals in its pages. It talked about having sex with Andrew 3 times, and Andrew obviously continues to deny any wrongdoing, but he did settle a legal claim with Virginia Giuffre for £12 million. He maintains that he never really met her. He doesn't remember meeting her, although there was the photo. He doesn't remember having that photo taken. And he did that appalling BBC interview where he had all sorts of sound bites where he claimed not to be able to sweat, and he turned around and said he couldn't have been at Tramp's nightclub because he was in Pizza Express in Woking. He remembers that very clearly, and spent the evening with his daughter because they wouldn't normally leave them away, and Fergie was away at that sort of side, and so basically he spent the night with her. It was a car crash television interview. Very few people watching it believed what he was saying. He thought that he did pretty well but the continued suggestions that keep coming out in the media, the continued leaked emails and so on and so forth, suggest a very, very different picture. So zero tolerance is what it is from the royal family now. It basically is a scorched earth policy. They want to distance themselves. And what they do in the extraordinary statement on the 30th of October from His Majesty King Charles was basically he wanted to say, look, it's victims front and centre. His thoughts are with those victims, which was the right thing to do. He's talking about transparency and victim support, which is trumping those bloodlines, and he's aiming to rebuild trust. And I always say that trust comes in on foot and leaves on horseback. And trust in the royal family at the moment has been at an all-time low with those revelations. But Prince William, as I mentioned beforehand, is trying to rebuild that trust. He did a brilliant interview with Eugenie Levy, where he tried to show himself the human side, if you like. He turned up on a scooter in Windsor Castle. He showed Eugenie around and took him down the pub and spoke about the way that he's going to modernise the monarchy. And hopefully that will resonate with the British public so you can rebuild that trust. Because it's very important, and I've talked about this on my show, the Andrew Eborn Show, available on more platforms than Paddington. And we talked about this because the economic effect of the royal family, what it contributes to the UK economy, has been estimated about £2.5 billion. That's £2.5 billion to the economy through tourism and various other things. So we need to make sure, even on a financial basis, that we do that. But certainly these steps are being taken, and they are looking quite positive from that basis to restore that all-important trust.
Indeed, and you've spoken of certain other revelations also coming to light amid the storm over the Epstein scandal. There's a fresh report that highlights that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor arranged a private tour of the Buckingham Palace while the late Queen was in residence. The tour was reportedly organised for businessmen Jay Bloom and Michael Evers, who held a cryptocurrency mining firm which allegedly agreed to pay his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, who they employed as a brand ambassador, up to £1.4 million. If this report holds true, does this incident then represent some sort of misuse of royal privilege and public resources? And what could the implications be?
Oh, absolutely. It smacks of blatant misuse of royal privilege, leveraging Buckingham Palace as a bargaining chip for personal gain, and again erodes that all-important public trust. And it could invite legal scrutiny for influence peddling and so on and so forth. The implications are dire. Potential parliamentary probes, there could be further taxpayer backlash, because obviously they're pushing that sort of side for stricter oversight on royal finance to prevent basically the palace from becoming a private networking hub. But it's not the first time that money has exchanged hands or potentially exchanged hands for access. There was the very famous case of Sarah Ferguson, married to Prince Andrew. Basically, there was a sting, and she was filmed apparently offering access to Prince Andrew for £500,000. I think it was back in 2010. And again, that sort of highlights that sort of aspect. Desperate for finance, the lengths that they would go to raise that money is quite scandalous. But paying for access is completely wrong. As I say, the best way to look at these things is sunlight is the best disinfectant. There will be more and more revelations, I predict, over the next few days, and I can come and unpack those with you. But we basically need to have that clean slate. More of these revelations, they need to control the narrative, say that we're going to look at all of these things, have a deep probe in order to restore that all-important trust.
Absolutely. I'd like to digress a little bit over here because there's another issue making headlines in the UK. There was a tragic knife attack on a London-bound train which led to 11 people being admitted to a hospital, some with severe, even life-threatening injuries. We've now seen a troubling rise in such incidents, whether in Manchester earlier, Southport, Hainault or Nottingham. Figures from Britain's Interior Ministry show that knife crime in England and Wales has surged by 87% over the past decade, with 54,587 offences recorded last year alone. This is a 2% increase from 2023 and amongst the highest rates in Europe. In this context, I wanted to understand, are the current laws sufficient or is it time for some reform?
Well, I think it's absolutely scandalous. First of all, I must praise the train driver, or not the train driver, both the train driver who took steps, but also the member of the crew who apparently saved far more people as a result of their bravery. The facts are coming out. It was an appalling attack. Members of the public were horrified. There were 11 people who were injured. One man has been arrested. Originally, there were 2 people arrested, and as the press rushed to sort of report what happened, one of the people has been released without charge. The other is still under investigation. So the facts will come out. And it's interesting, the narrative in the media, because we've had a lot of these situations which in the past, such as in Southport, have sparked riots when misinformation or disinformation gets spread. So they try to talk about the nationality of the person, they talk about the colour of the person, and so on and so forth, to try and put that into context. But also we mustn't rush to ascertain exactly what happened. We need to make sure that everybody understands what are the causes. Now, having a knife in and of itself obviously should not be happening. The current laws are basically not being enforced in the appropriate way. It is woeful. They failed to stem the tide of knife violence. So yes, it's high time for bold reforms. We might need to look at things like mandatory minimum sentences, enhanced stop and search powers, and investment also in youth prevention programs. There needs to be these systemic change. And as I say, we need to look at the root cause. Having a car on the road doesn't make you a murderer. If you use that car for mowing people down, that's what we need to look at. So have a look at those facts, because the statistics are awful. But basically, the action calls for action beyond rhetoric. You look at some of the statistics. I was looking at them myself. Knife-enabled offences in England and Wales, it reached 54,587 in the year ending March 2025. That was up 2% from 2023 and 87% over the decade. And that's per the ONS data. And this is despite a 5% dip to June 2025. The rates remain shamefully among Europe's highest. And what we need to look at is the causes of that. As I say, it's not the knives, it's the people behind those sort of things using those as weapons. We need to look at those causes and look at those as a matter of urgency. Enough rhetoric, it's time for action.
Absolutely. We've also seen UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer calling the incident appalling. British Interior Minister Shabana Mahmood has also stated that she was deeply saddened. But beyond words, what sort of response is needed to tackle the root causes? How can leveraging technology such as AI also help in the long run?
Well, beyond platitudes, we do need concrete action. Ramped up community policing, knife amnesty programs, education campaigns targeting at-risk youths are really, really important. As you know, I speak around the world about AI, artificial intelligence, and how that can be used to basically enhance all sorts of services, not just introducing efficiencies. And I'm determined to put the AI into Britain, having a look at that sort of side. So it can be used for things like predictive policing, can be used for facial recognition at hotspots and social media monitoring to preempt, if you like, gang violence. The pushback from it is all about people's privacy, and you need to get the balance on that sort of right. But certainly the technology is there, so you can turn data into deterrence for a safer future, and that's what we need to look at. But certainly it's a massive problem, and we need to get beyond the rhetoric and start taking action.
I'd like to shift the focus now to the larger security environment in Europe. The EU hopes to use frozen Russian assets to fund Kyiv's defensive efforts, which is a plan that seeks to address Ukraine's long-term needs. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has just come out and ruled out providing Tomahawks to Ukraine and also using frozen Russian assets. The Tomahawks themselves were being touted as a game changer, as it would provide an edge to Ukraine in the short term. In your assessment, what needs to be done to address Ukraine's urgent needs, especially with winter on the anvil?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Trump's Tomahawk refusal, it does leave this huge void that the Allies can't ignore. But I would go back to the central point, because we can still throw lots and lots of money, lots and lots of resources, and this war will drag on forever and ever with casualties which are absolutely appalling. Behind all those statistics, there are families, there are people who are suffering, people are desperate for this war to end. We had still resonating the meeting between Trump and Putin. And basically, Putin won that battle, if you like, from the PR point of view. He was in taking control of the press conferences, even though it's just a statement. He was sitting in the huge vehicle from that sort of thing and buddying up to Trump, a very different sort of reaction, you might recall, to the reception that Zelensky got with Trump when he came along talking about giving more money and basically Trump turning around and saying how ungrateful he was. It was all planned theatrics, I believe, on that sort of basis. But we need to focus. The focus needs to shift, not just on keep on throwing more and more money and more arms on this, but let's get peace. And the best way of securing peace is jaw, not war.
Indeed. And one last question, quick comment, because I'm running short of time. Even with Operation Eastern Sentry being launched by NATO, the response we've seen so far on the ground has been very measured. It's been very calibrated. NATO seems to be avoiding an escalation and a hot war with Russia. Could we then see pressure being put on the Russians in the Baltic? We've recently seen France as well intercept one of the shadow fleet vessels of Russia. Could we see some sort of action on that front?
Oh, I think absolutely there's going to be escalating pressure in the Baltic. NATO could ramp up naval patrols, cyber defences and joint exercises to counteract Russians' hybrid tactics like drone incursions and sabotage. It's a smart escalation ladder. You've got to deter without direct conflict. We're signalling resolve to Moscow while protecting those vulnerable flanks.
Absolutely. With that, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Eborn, for taking our time and speaking to us on Focal Length.